Sanish Acharja ta on Dr. John O'Neill Igula Lord Lynn. Dr. John O'Neill is going to speak with us from Letterpress. John O'Neill.
Good Raymond. I'm going to keep my remarks relatively short since you all really want to hear Gregory talking, not me. And I'm a bit of an interloper here because I'm half Tyrone, half Belfast, so you can hold half that against me. To pick up where Raymond was finishing off, I'm just going to make a few remarks about the context that the book sits in Irish history writing. Now, my main writing and research background is actually archaeology rather than history, but being sort of involved in Irish prehistory is more relevant to doing research on clandestine organisations like the IRA, because, of course, you're not going to a public archive, you're not going to pull down the prony to ask them to go and get the particular division's records for you. You have to go and you have to discover where the information is, and you have to find it in a whole range of different sources and construct, like Gregory has, a chronology. Now, the interesting aspect about all of that is you don't go in with preconceptions, so you have to work out what you're looking for, what you might find, because it may not be the records, it's the newspaper accounts and it's memoirs, and it's all the various little bits of information. But when you start assembling them, and I published a book on the Belfast IRA between the 1920s and 1960s, and all of this kind of relates to key points in 20th century history and 21st century history, of course, in Ireland. But the kind of context of them all is by pure chance today. A guy called Stephen O'Neill, not the Tyrone footballer, before anybody says they're never reading the book. He published the book today, it's reviewed in Irish Times, and it's Burying the Truth of Partition. Now, the whole point of this book is reviewing the history writing around the War of Independence period and early histories of partition and the events that surrounded it. And of course, the whole issue with it is there are very few histories of it. If you want to go and find a history of any of the northern elements of the IRA from the 1920s or the Belfast pogroms or anything else, they use the term coined by Father John Hassan. These weren't published at the time. The book that Facts and Figures of the Belfast Pogrom, the kind of famous book that was suppressed by Michael Collins in August 1922. It wasn't published until the 1990s. Alan Parkinson, very few people published anything at all up until the 1990s. So ironically, when people talk now about conflict resolution and all these kind of great ideas and themes, there is no history of them in Ireland if you go back and look at it. I mean, there's the public discussion of what happened in 1919, 1920, 1921 never took place, 1922, none of these things happened. So we have no history or legacy of dealing with conflict in that sense, and a history writing where we go through that process. Even in the South after the Civil War, there was a lot of personal memoirs written, but there was no attempt to kind of address all these different issues as well. So there's no legacy of that in Ireland, and so when it comes to the modern era, we've nothing to go back to from 1920s or 30s to say, okay, this is how we do this. So if you think of even from the period, if you want to, obviously, given that it's Irish history, you can go back as far as you want with this. But if you go back to the British government convincing Unionists and Irish Republicans and Nationalists that they could both achieve their ideals by going to the First World War, and you have John Redmond and then you have the Ulster Volunteers and everyone going to fight the First World War, and the sort of horrific slaughter and trauma of all that, then that's your context for a lot of 1919, 1920, 1921. But because there is no legacy of history writing about this, there's no shared language being created where everyone can join in this conversation. So, and I am going to wrap up very quickly here because we want to move on to Gregory. But the key point in a lot of that is that you have to, we have to find language, and we have to kind of transcend a century of not talking about these things to find the kind of space to do that. And I mean, obviously, it's a great space here today to be launching a book like this. But it's sort of, there's a bit of synergy there with finding that space in language. And I think Michael D. Higgins used this phrase, narrative hospitality. or hospitality of narratives or something, and there is something sympathetic in there, and I think it's a conversation that needs to be broadened out, and we need to kind of create that language to help other people talk about it. So in that context, Gregory's book, because it's very much factual, and it tries to, James Schlesinger's famous quote, you can have your own opinions, but you can't have your own facts. In this case, Gregory's giving people facts, and you can use those facts to then form your opinions, which I think is, at least the first step, or one of the first steps in trying to do this. So at that point, I'm going to hand over to the man himself to entertain you all. Thank you.